Let's get more analysis now on this. In the studio with me is Tom Burke, environmentalist and chairman of E3G. Thank you so much for joining us, Tom. Isn't it interesting? Who would have thought we'd be here a few years ago, that China would be at the forefront of all of this and the United States would be pulling back on climate change?
I agree. That's a real switch around. For a long time, China was the real backmarker. What we saw in the run-up to Paris was the US and China really becoming the locomotive that drew the world forward. And what we're now seeing is President Trump trying to make the US the backmarker, the brake, stalling the whole thing.
How much of a setback will it be if President Trump decides to roll back on all of this?
For the world, it will be a setback to climate diplomacy. Paris put us on the right road, but it didn't go far enough and it didn't go fast enough to really tackle the problem. So pulling out, if that's what he does, it will slow down the effort to go faster and further. But it won't stop what's already going on. And as we've heard from all kinds of commentators all over the world, in the real economy, the transition is already well underway. And that won't be stopped by pulling out of the Paris Agreement.
And there is political will in the United States to push back on Washington's line on this.
I think that's absolutely right. You have most of the states, in fact, of all the states that have made commitments to carry on tackling climate change were added together. They'd be the 5th largest economy in the world. So you're really seeing massive economic and political commitment, irrespective of what President Trump does. This is not really about making America great again. It's about taking America back to the 70s. There are 50,000 US jobs employed in the mining industry. There are 250,000 employed in the solar industry alone. This isn't about going forward to a better future. This is about trying to go backwards to what was a world we were quite happy to get away from.
Indeed, because I've heard some critics say this isn't about right or wrong. This is about a White House that's full of climate change skeptics.
I think you're exactly right. I think this is about people who are trying to live in an alternative reality, and what comes out of an alternative reality are alternative facts. And in order to believe what people like Steve Bannon, Steve Miller, other of Trump's advisors believe, then you have to really believe that almost everybody else, all the major businesses, all the scientists in the world, all of the other governments in the world have all somehow been taken in a giant hoax. Now, you have to be living somewhere very strange to believe that. But I think what's much more worrying, in a sense, if Mr. Trump pulls out, his most respected advisors, his Secretary of State, his Defense Secretary, his National Security Advisor, all think that this is a really major problem, a threat to America's core interests, and he is repudiating them, just as he's repudiating all of America's traditional allies. So there are more risks to, I think, President Trump's administration than there are to the climate.
And I suppose what you're alluding to is China then taking a leadership role on this.
And we've seen exactly that, and I think what we'll see tomorrow from the EU-China summit that's currently going on is a pretty vigorous statement that identifies this as one of the imperatives to be challenged by the world going forward. And there's no doubt at all that one of the other consequences, if Trump does pull out, is that essentially they've handed over leadership on a really central issue to China.
Indeed. Tom Burke, really fascinating talking to you, and we'll have to wait and see what happens in the next few hours when we hear from President Trump. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Now, of course, you can get full details on the science of climate change and the Paris Accord at our website, what it is and what it all means. Go to the usual place, bbc.com/news/climate.